is bound to have happened to you at some point. You literally cannot click away and you're dying to know what happens next. YouTube thrives on captivating storytelling. One technique that really stands out is something that is called the Zeigarnik effect. And it's a psychological phenomenon that you can harness to literally hook your audience till the very last second. That's next.
Hey, welcome to the Video Creators Podcast presented by vidIQ. You know how you put a lot of time and energy into your YouTube channel for not nearly enough growth? Yep, we get it. We are here today to help you change that.
Hello, creators. How are you guys? It's great to see you here for another Video Creators Podcast episode brought to you by vidIQ like we do every Monday. We're just hanging out. We are sharing more advanced growth tips and tactics, next level strategy, growing your business, helping you reach more people and change their lives. I'm hanging out with Sam and Blake, two of our YouTube strategists here on the team. Guys, what's new?
I'll do that too with my
That's new for you.
New cast. Okay.
New cast.
New cast. You've had a cast, but now this looks like a new cast.
This is like my third iteration of a cast.
It's crazy.
I just had my surgery 2 weeks ago. I'm actually probably going to hold my hand like this most of the time because it's starting to go and get in pain. But yeah, it's quite the experience. For those of you who don't know, if you want to hear a fun story, I mean, I wasn't fully asleep or numb by the time they started cutting into my hand. So that's the last thing I remember before going to sleep. So
I didn't know this.
You didn't know that? Oh my
no,
goodness,
you didn't tell me.
That was brutal. I'll tell you about it later.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
I can't even speak. My hand hurts all of a sudden.
I know.
That sucks. And now you're suffering for the audience.
I'm doing it for the people. That's
dedication.
what I'm here for. Yeah.
Well, guys, today a lot of our audience struggles with storytelling. And this is like the thing on YouTube. Ironically, Tim was one of the first people to talk about it. He was one of the first strategists to really dip into storytelling when people were like, what? What is that? And it is something that's very clunky, especially if you're a how-to channel, not going to lie. But it's clunky for a lot of people. But there's one facet of storytelling that people tend to kind of ignore. And I'd love for us to really dig into it today to do it justice. Because if you can master this, this is a way for you to master retention and literally yank somebody from the very beginning all the way through to the end. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is kind of based off of, and I have a feeling that even when I recorded this hook with the guys here, in between we Googled it because I myself wasn't 100% certain if I said it right after Sam brought it up. And apparently I didn't because I just approached it from a German mindset, and pronounced it Zeigarnik. But apparently it's not. How do you say it, guys?
Well, I can't say it because it's Russian. I can't say it in a Russian accent like you did with the German accent.
Zeigarnik, apparently. Zeigarnik. Yes. So I don't want to do Mr. Zeigarnik a disservice here, but that's how you apparently say it. So what we're going to talk about here are open story loops. And it's a storytelling device that really kind of creates suspense and curiosity. Think of it kind of like narrative cliffhangers, right? It makes your audience, they have to stick around. And that's that psychological thing of like, I gotta see what happens next. I'm guessing that this is something that's used in movies all the time, right? You guys look like you were just waiting. You needed to know what was coming next right now. If I was to think about what you guys were thinking. So if I say to you open loops, what does that really mean when you start to think about video structure?
Are we answering as YouTube strategists or as potentially just someone watching?
Whichever person you want to be.
So I'm a very visual person, so this might just be kind of an answer for me and how I interpret that. But when I think of like a retention graph from like a video start to finish, and you kind of see like that line straight through. A lot of times it's not straight and it's kind of a downward trend through the end. There are no loops in your retention graph, but I actually like the visual of opening up a loop because that line actually kind of goes up and it kind of creates this circle, like this loop. And so if there's kind of a visual way that we could capture some intrigue or pull a viewer into that moment in our video, wherever we're at in the timeline, whether it's kind of at the beginning of the video or the middle or the end of our video. I like that kind of visual of like, let's open a loop and kind of pull them in. And I kind of imagine this like little roller coaster or something.
Yeah, that's how I was thinking
where
too.
it kind of like pulls
You're visually
them,
painting it for me too.
Yeah, it kind of like pulls them into the next moment, because if we're not creating that suspense or intrigue or things as we're moving along a story, then it's just kind of the series of events of like, I did this and then I did this and then I did this and then I did this. And it's just not really moving me well. Yeah. So that's what's happening in my brain right now.
It's interesting because I see a different picture when I think of open loops, and I wonder if some of the audience would resonate with this as well. For me, when I think of like 3-act structure, I think of like 3 circles, right? You have your first circle that says beginning right in the middle. And then you have your middle, but it overlaps the very end. So the beginning and the end of the loops overlap. And then you have your end doing the same thing. So to me, the open loops is kind of like you're saying, you're kind of being pulled into the end, but yet at the same time, you're opening the beginning of the next one. And that's what I think. So I think of like, what's it called? A Venn diagram. Yep. Where you have circles that overlap and it's in the middle of that. That's this open loop. That's how I visually see it. So that's curious.
I mean, I've seen it both ways. I mean, I picture like the Audi symbol for the car, or however you say it. That's what it is. So the loops kind of going together. But even with Sam was saying it too, I think about it like, think how boring a roller coaster would be if it was just either just going down or just flat the entire time. It kind of like, it re-excites you every single time you're doing that loop. And that's why they do it.
Great visual.
Yeah.
Yeah. So cool. Okay. So now that we have the visual down, what else about it?
Yeah. I mean, they're narrative cliffhangers. It's what keeps you excited to want to stick around and watch more. I mean, we talk about hooks at the beginning of our content, but I don't think it stops right there. I mean, you have to keep people wanting to re-engage the entire time. But same idea as what we talk about all the time. You know, we don't want to have any ending language. We want people to know that the story is almost over. Yes, we have to close sections, but we have to keep them sticking around so they make it to the next section, so they do get to the end of the video.
So that's an interesting point. It makes me think of a question. Do these have to actually overlap each other? Or can there be different kinds of loops in a video?
I feel like there can be different kinds, because I imagine if you are setting up a story at the very beginning, let's say at the very beginning of your video, you're setting up story. Ideally, there's some intrigue there. And then you're kind of setting up what's going to happen through like from beginning to end. Like this is like the ultimate story happening here. Maybe you have this little tiny interrupt halfway through that of, you know, this is what we're doing today, but first there's this major problem happening that I really need to get taken care of. And now you've kind of opened this new loop right in the middle. And so it's not necessarily like that first loop has almost come to an end and then you've kind of overlapped it. It's almost kind of right in the middle of this first loop, this first circle. We've kind of introduced like a new, smaller loop that's kind of within this big overarching story.
Interesting. I feel like you can totally have something where you're setting the viewer up in a big way, and then also potentially having several different loops in the middle, but the first one doesn't really fully get closed out until the end.
Are you thinking kind of like maybe like throwing out a bunch of different fishing lines and reeling them in at different times? Like everything's slowly kind of coming in or resolving? That's the kind of one way I was thinking about it at the beginning, but
yeah, definitely. So how do you make this? And this is actually a very fascinating conversation. And I love Blake writing this episode because Sam and I both really love storytelling. All three of us do. And it's kind of, Tim has ruined movies forever for all of us. And if he were here, he would be really into this conversation. But I feel like we need to somehow make this practical for the person who is brand new to storytelling. So how would you do that? Paint a picture for that person.
Yeah, I would say like tangibly, if you're going to open a loop, to me, that is kind of like the setup of a story. Who's the character? What do they want? If there are stakes there, like what are the stakes here? But set up like what is the story that is about to happen here? And that can even start as early as even the title and the thumbnail. You know, maybe even ideally, that kind of visual story is happening in the thumbnail. So what happens is the viewer is going to see that and click in. You know, you've probably seen videos where the video is on the premise of like, I tried X for 30 days or something like that. And so there's some intrigue there, but there's a story being pitched as well. So I would say that even that's kind of the start of that first loop being opened. So maybe more tangibly, that's kind of what I would think as far as like the setup of a video, but you can open up these loops in multiple places kind of throughout the video. So
would you say that is really the title and the thumbnail?
I would say the first one, ideally, yeah. That doesn't always happen though. I wouldn't say that there's always enough context in the title thumbnail to really set up the story. So definitely past the title of thumbnail in the opening seconds of that hook, definitely being sure that is where you're setting up the story and like opening that first loop.
I feel like we need to have a practical conversation of what a very simple story. Well, we can look at two different ways of telling a story. Ultimately, a story is really about tension and change at its most stripped down form. But I feel like we can give you a little bit more of a set structure to go through first. So, guys, what do you think?
Let's do it. What topic? Sam, can you think of anything, Sam, that we can talk about story-wise? Give me something.
See. All right. So we're gonna talk about a video where we're baking the world's largest pizza.
I think Sam's hungry.
I really am, guys.
I haven't eaten today myself, so this is good. We're baking the world's largest pizza. I love this.
Okay, so let's say it's me doing the video. Okay, so who's the character, Sam?
Oh, it's you.
There you go. Yeah.
Unless it's me. Do you want me to be the character?
I don't want you in the video. So.
Good. Okay. Great. Even better.
I'm the character. What do I want?
You want to make the world's largest pizza.
Okay. Why can't I have what I want? Let's see. So, I don't know. There's various things. First of all, I don't have an oven that big.
How are you going to buy all the ingredients?
How big is the world's largest pizza even?
Right. You're probably going to need help too.
Okay, maybe you should be in the video. One. Yeah.
Thanks. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, why can't I have what I want? So I don't know. I can't make pizza. I can hardly cook. I burn ice. I don't know how I do it, but I do it. It's true. Who's the character? What I want? Why can't I have what I want? Next question, Sam.
What are the stakes?
What are the stakes? Yes. Okay. Well, I have to feed I have to feed Tim's family. He's got 7 kids. I need the biggest pizza possible. Okay. If I can't do it, they're going to go hungry tonight, and it's going to be my fault. And I can't let that happen because I have to do Tim a service here.
Yeah, and if you're really going along the Tim line, Tim's very competitive. So chances are he wants to beat the last person who has the world record, right?
Right.
Yep.
Right. So we have 2 stakes there. Okay.
Yep.
And who or what comes along to help me? So at this point, this is where I'll invite Sam and say, fine, you can be in the video if you really want to. If he wants his 15 minutes of fame, we'll bring him in.
There we go.
Doesn't mean we'll get it done. It just means he's there to help me. And then how do we ultimately get it? Well, either we burn the pizza like crazy or, we succeed and we get the biggest pizza in the world. Maybe we do one of the 2 stakes. Maybe we actually get it done in time, but it's not the biggest one. I don't know. And how are we transformed? Well, I should have asked somebody else to help me because we probably could have got it done rather than Sam. But it's done. And I'm happy. I fed the family. Everyone's happy. Tim's happy. We beat the record. That's the transformation.
Okay. That's a very good practical example. I'm very hungry right now. So I would love to kind of have a conversation of where we would actually use these loops for somebody to kind of give them, I don't know, some sort of a practical way of putting this concept into action. All right. So where do you start? I think we kind of touched on it a little bit, but titles and thumbnails, right? It's really your first opportunity. Yep. So consider it your first line of your video. All right. So from there, you're looping them right in. Now what?
I mean, that's when our first hook comes in. So I'm going to start the video. Okay. Yeah, I mean, the title and thumbnail is going to set up the kind of the purpose of what we're going to do, but leaving it open enough that we're curious about clicking in. Now my job is to build upon that intrigue even more by saying, the biggest pizza, but you have no idea how you have no idea, what it takes to do this, or how many ingredients we're actually going to need to do this, or what's going to happen next, or I can't believe, the outcome of what we got. But now there's more of an intrigue to why I should stick around even farther.
Yeah, I feel like you can, ideally, when you're looking at this from a practical level, probably start incorporating them right into the script if you're scripting, or outline, right? If you don't like to script. So when you're coming in, just like Blake was talking about, coming in on a hook, you want to kind of set up that question or situation really early. Set that promise up really early. Then the loops are going to guide the viewer all the way through the end, right? In essence, kind of like mini hooks within the video from section to section.
Yeah.
Is there anything to be mindful of at all?
I think it's important as you're opening each kind of mini loop to close them too. What comes to mind for me is we're kind of setting up. So we have like that initial hook that's kind of like the main, this is driving the story. I almost think each of those little obstacles can be little loops that we're opening. Like, but we realize like,
let's go to the pizza now.
Yeah. We need to get enough flour. Who's going to sell enough flour for us to actually do this? What's that? And so now you have this almost little mini story. But if you were to not ever close that would really not be satisfying for the viewer. And I think a lot of times a good story leads to like the viewer feeling satisfied. So maybe you open up that loop and, okay, well, now we got to find where we're going to get enough flour for this thing. Then you get enough flour. Then that might be a good opportunity to quickly open up, well, what's some of the other obstacles that we came up against? Well, there's no oven big enough for this thing. So we got to figure out what that's going to look like. And so, you have these small loops that you're kind of opening, but you're also closing them too.
In the same token, being aware too that I want to be able to bring in that next steak before closing that loop, because I could say, let's go look for flour. Cool, we found the flour. We finally got it. Now I've ending language that video's in that person's mind, it's over before I've even gotten to the next reason why they should stick around. So being aware of that at the same time.
So how do you actually navigate that practically?
Yeah, I mean, as you're in that loop, I think you're just being aware of it. Okay, I'm in this loop right now. How do I tease the next one before I even come to the conclusion? Because yes, I have to resolve it. Otherwise, they'll feel cheated. But before I get to it, instead of saying "and," say "but." Yes, I'm going to get flour, but I don't know who to buy it from, or something like that. And then at that point, I've set that up. Now I'm into the next journey. Okay, we've got the flour, but I don't know. Do we have a bowl big enough to even do this? Let's go figure that out. Okay, now we finally got the flour. We're walking away from it. I don't know. But that leads to a point where we're creating more questions before we've even closed off that loop at some point.
Yeah, and I feel like for those that do this really expertly, and I think that you can do this in, spectacle niche, you can do this in how-to niches, you can do this even in vlogging content. You could very easily string several mini loops together. And it really just makes it intriguing if you're keeping them open long enough to bridge the gap of the next one, right? And then you just can very simply close that and move on. But Sam's right. If you leave something open, then it doesn't feel good, right? It's like that nagging thing, and that's never a good feeling. And the thing is you want the viewer to be completely satisfied by the time they get to the end, which is where the transformation is. So now that you've kind of moved them throughout, the content, what's next? What's like the end loop, or is that just it at the end? Are we done?
I think ideally we want at the very end, that's going to be definitely the like big transformation. Like this is the kind of the main story that we drove from the beginning. We want to have like a clear ending to that. And we want it to be satisfying too, not like a 2 seconds, like, all right, we did it. So if you enjoyed this video, thanks for stopping by. Like, definitely lean into the transformational moment there. But I think as quickly as you can, opening a new loop at the end too, like ideally that's going to be what's going to pull people into your next video. So, if that's going to be, and this is where proactive planning comes into play as well. You're going to want to plan out what's the next video that you're going to point them to. Maybe if this is a channel that's all about making giant food and maybe tiny food, maybe they have one where they made like the world's smallest, I don't know, grilled cheese sandwich or something like that.
I love those channels where they have the mini kitchens.
Yeah,
I could watch them all. I could watch that niche all day long.
Fun fact, that was one of the very first consultations I ever did, was a
Really?
tiny cooking. They had tiny little utensils too. It was the most wholesome thing I've ever seen in my life.
Yes, there's a niche for everything.
There really is. Yeah.
There
People
really
always
is.
ask me that. Do you think I can make it? I'm like, trust me, I've seen everything. You can do it.
Yeah. But yeah, if you were to open up have that in mind of, okay, well, maybe we're calling to like the world's smallest grilled cheese video that we shot whenever, you can close the main loop and then quickly use the but language. Like that's really, really helpful. Mm-hmm. But this was the first attempt at making big food, or maybe let's reverse that. But we have all kinds of experience making big food, but what would it look like to make the world's smallest meal? We actually have this, this story here, like you don't want to miss it kind of a thing. So you're kind of leaving off this intriguing question at the end and getting somebody to click versus just kind of if you enjoy this one, I think you'll enjoy this one too.
Yeah, that's not as interesting. And I've got call to actions now in my mind just exploding over like how you can actually effectively give somebody a deep reason why they have to watch the smallest cooking video after watching the largest.
I want to watch it now.
Right? Yeah.
Curious.
Because there's probably some serious skill needed in creating the ultimate sauce, right? For the tiniest grilled cheese sandwich in the world, in order for it to have the flavor that explodes in your mouth, leaving you that sensation that you just had a big sandwich. Sorry. I'm really hungry. So I'm curious though, there are lots of different techniques, right, to create successful open loops. Let's talk about some of those. Like, what would be some techniques that you guys would think would work here?
I think one thing that I think of is the teaser technique. So this is great for people. Sometimes, it might be an entertainment channel. You can tease what's to come later on in the video. That's a great open hook.
That's a great idea.
Some people, there's a big tension moment. Even podcasts, I've seen people do that as well too. And they'll tease what some of the high tension moments of what's going to happen in the podcast, whether it's, and sometimes it could be out of context a little bit. Some people have done that, but it sparks your interest. Like, oh, why did he say that? Or what does he mean there? Or how did that shark get in the ocean next to the pizza? I don't know. But now I'm interested to know, and I want to figure out how they got there.
And I'm thinking probably along the same lines, because that's like something that you do see a lot of, and it doesn't have to be just visual. It can, like you said, it can also just be, a verbal glimpse of what's coming later in the video. And it doesn't have to be so on the nose of, but wait until later. You can literally just tease that in the story. But I'm thinking, like, what about like the question kind of technique, like posing a thought-provoking question, but really promising that answer later. So you're like leaving them hanging, but you know what? We can't quite get to that just yet. First, we have to dig into here. See how I just did that? That was really simple, but yet you still need to have that first loop closed so you're willing to move forward. And that's kind of that very simple way of just opening up a loop with a question. But first, we have to dig into something else. And so kind of makes me think too of like the incomplete story a little. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
What does that mean for you?
Yeah, to me, I think it's like, we open one of these loops, and what comes to mind for me is, maybe we met somebody at one of the shops where they were selling the flour that we just got for making this pizza. Mm-hmm. And we got to talk with them, and they like needed help with something, or maybe they wanted to be a part of, let's say they wanted to be a part of making the pizza later. And then it's like, well, great, but we're not going to be able to cook this until later tonight because we actually still need to pick up all these ingredients. And so we can kind of almost press pause on that story of having this, shop owner come and help with the pizza later, because we have all these other things to do first. And then that's where it's really important to make sure we're closing that loop eventually, because at the end, when the shop owner shows up and is helping with the pizza, that's like, we had this incomplete story we set up at the beginning, and then we close the loop when they show up towards the end.
So guys, one of the other techniques that I was kind of thinking of was the cliffhanger technique. And I'm curious what your thoughts are here on how to practically apply this when it comes to open loops.
Well, I'll say, first of all, when it comes to TV, I hate cliffhangers the most. I think I'm one of those people that needs closure, and it works every single time, and it drives me nuts. First time I sat down to watch Prison Break, I tried to watch a few episodes. I'd be up till 2, 3 a.m. watching the shows because they were just so good at it. But that shows you the power behind it. So I hate it, but I love it at the same time. But the reason we use it in our content too is, the whole goal is, we want to satisfy, the viewer, and we want them to keep watching more. And the same idea is when we're bringing them to section to section, we want to bring them out of that section and into the next video, so they want to watch more content. And that would be, us delivering the value of why the next video is going to be that important. I need to stick around after this one's closed and go into the next one.
Yeah, I really love that. And if you really think about it, and for me, it was 24, the show 24 with Kiefer Sutherland. So truly masterful. I actually made a video all based around that. For the channel here. It's really like just hooks in general is where my mind goes with the cliffhanger technique, because at the beginning of the video, you're hooking them into the video, and sometimes in between, it is really, when you think about it, also the incomplete story.
Yeah, true.
Right?
Definitely is.
They kind of touch, it can be various things, but you have this thing that kind of leaves you hanging and you need to hear more. And that's that feeling that you feel here. And it's like you are literally pulled forward, whether that's at the end of the video, during the video. But yeah, you're right. I hate cliffhangers too. And that's what got me to binge watch all the seasons.
I feel like everyone can relate with Netflix these days. I mean, this is why I hated TV as a kid, because you have to wait another week to watch the show, and then I'd be crying in bed like, why can't when Marvel shows come out and they have cliffhangers, like I'm waiting for the next episode, and it drives me nuts. That's usually why I wait till they're all out.
Blake is seriously affected by this. I can hear it. I see the tension breathe.
I see the tears on his face.
All right, so we've given you guys a lot of different techniques and stuff, but what about common mistakes? See what I did there? Yeah.
That was good. I was on the edge of my seat. What was it going to be?
Of your sheet? Huh?
The edge of my sheet.
That's great.
Yeah. It's tough times. I'm recording the podcast on the sheet over here, and I was on the edge of it. So,
oh, good Lord. All right, guys. Common mistakes in open loops. Just curious. Like, what have you really seen? Again, make this super practical for people, because I know that you guys have worked with hundreds of creators and you've watched so much YouTube. What really are some of the standouts that you see mistakes people make?
I think surprisingly, one of the mistakes I see a lot is actually not opening loops, but closing loops. And so I'll watch a video, and then there are like these kind of transformation moments, or like, it's like they're closing a story and including these things that I'm like, I didn't even know you were trying to do this. Or like, I didn't even, like, imagine if you had set up open this loop earlier on in the video and set up the story that you're closing right now. this has such a bigger impact now, if you were to actually lean into that. So I think with that, I think there are a lot of times where there are obstacles potentially, like kind of in this main story that we've set up, that, they're there, the creator just doesn't vocalize them or doesn't, lean into them. Like maybe for the world's largest pizza, if you were to set up that story at the beginning and then not share the obstacles of like, oh, we need all the flour, how are we going to get that? Or we need the oven, how are we going to build that?
Great point.
And that's just totally bypassed. And maybe those were real issues that they ran into while shooting, but they didn't include it in the video. Then we have this transformation of like, okay, we did it. We made the pizza, and we see like this custom oven built, and the viewer might even be questioning like, man, I wonder how they got all the sauce. How'd they get all the flour? So really like lean into those and open those loops, because it's going to make the resolution at the end like so much more powerful too.
I feel like this is a very common mistake for how-to channels.
Yeah.
Because when you think about it, and I see it, and we're going to go back to cooking because both Sam and I are starving. I see it all the time on cooking channels. They're so worried about having the Instagram shot and making everything so perfect, and having you see how I take these ingredients and transform it into something else. But you're taking all the guts out of it.
Yeah.
You're like Sam said, it's just not, it's like it leaves more curiosity than it does satisfaction. So if I don't really feel, and that I think is the true cost, the stake here, is if you don't like touch on that part, yeah, maybe you got me to the end just because I was curious on how to make that. But I'm not curious to watch more.
Yeah. Well, I think the misconception too is, nowadays things are so punchy and fast. It's like, but I have to cut out all the guts to make it more fast paced.
And
so
that's
people
a mistake.
stay longer.
Yeah.
But you're actually kind of like sabotaging yourself, because even if it's a bit longer, all of that like pulling the viewer along more and more, I think it's going to have higher satisfaction by the very end. But it's also going to help, even though it's a longer video, it's going to help get the person to the end in the first place.
Yeah, I think
100%.
to add to that too, I think I get some creators who say, well, I don't, I know my stuff, so I'm not going to mess it up. Like odds are I won't screw up making the food or building this. I'm like, that's cool if you know your stuff, but people watching may not. Talk me through what could go wrong as you're in the moment.
Right.
Yeah, we're making this right now, but I could overdo it and I could burn the crust. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but at least now there are the stakes there involved that I'm aware of. Even though what you're doing, it may not happen, I'm still pulled in saying, okay, what can I do to avoid screwing up, the dough of making the pizza? I don't know.
Yeah. Or maybe that obstacle is like a past version of yourself. Like, I've been cooking for 30 years. I remember the crust was the hardest part every time because I have burned so many of them. So here's what we're going to do to not let that happen, kind of thing.
Yes, that's a great way of doing it. I feel like another thing that people make a very big mistake around is overusing open loops. So, just like we were talking about leaving, too many unanswered questions, if you make me jump through too many hoops and loops, at some point you run the risk of me just being like, okay, I get it. And I could end up skipping or bouncing out of the video, because you have to remember the viewer is just waiting for a reason to leave. So I think finding that balance of what is enough to leave in with what's too much, right? Yeah.
You can confuse too. I think having too many, I can lose track of.
That's a good point.
Where are we at right now? Because I feel like I've watched movies like that. There's been so much happen. I'm like, how did we get here? There were so many open loops that just brought me to this point. I don't remember what it was that got us here. So that's kind of a tactic that can happen too.
Yeah. Anything else that you guys can think of?
I think just maybe a thought that I'm having for that as we're introducing more loops, I think it is important to have a bit of a let's tie what we're doing back to the main story too. Because if maybe we set up the main story at the beginning and we do open a couple of loops along the way that require us to kind of deviate from the path and kind of go all over the place. I think the viewer, when you had mentioned they're looking for a reason to leave, I think if it gets too far away from the main thread that is the main story, it is helpful to tie us back to the main objective kind of thing.
So
too.
it's almost like, so from a practical perspective for the audience here, it's really more of reintroducing stakes a little bit.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's a very, very easy way of doing that, especially if you do start to get a little complex. I think, which is not a bad thing. We're not saying that you can't make your videos complex, but you just have to kind of watch for the balance, I feel. Anything else that you can think of?
Well, I think to add to that too, like reintroducing the stakes, I feel like I've seen creators do that, especially when there's a time limit. It's like reintroducing, hey, we have 5 hours left. Hey, we have 4 hours left. Okay, we're running out of time. We have 3 hours left now. And that's the same stake, but it's just reintroducing it. So I'm reminded, oh yeah, there's a time limit. Oh yeah, we're missing this. So I think that's helpful to do that. So that, exactly, you can probably have 1 or 2 stakes, but as long as you keep emphasizing them and how important they are, or how much bigger that one stake is growing and growing, that'll put me back in.
It's funny because I feel like the spectacle niche is really, really great at that, right? Channels like Mr. Beast or Eric or even Ryan Trahan, where there's a clock, and you could very easily tackle some of these things too visually without you actually needing to overtly say them. You could just have a countdown clock going, just like 24 did. Right? You see the countdown clock, and then it's like it's this constant question is like, are they going to make it?
Your anxiety rises with it. Yeah.
One of my favorite creators, Peter McKinnon, whereas Sam loves Ryan, I love Peter, and it's one of those things where he has this fun little video, called 2 Minute Tuesdays from time to time. He never makes it in 2 minutes. But yet it's always there and the clock is counting down, and it's like I'm looking for it and I'm waiting for that, and then I'm waiting for the next thing. It also causes intrigue. Yeah. So it's a good little loop. Any thoughts on anything else that's a common mistake for anybody?
I think neglecting open loops across video series too. So the same idea we talked before about, the idea of how do I rehook somebody into the next video? Same idea for a series. I think people assume that if I make a series, someone's going to watch it the entire way through, and that's not always necessarily the case. Now, that's what we want, but if you can give them a good reason of why they should stick around and watch that next video, a part of that series, then that's more likely to happen. Again, first of all, having the videos being able to stand alone by themselves, so that no matter where they're found within the series, it's watchable. But just because it's labeled 1 through 5 doesn't mean I'm going to watch 1 through 5 unless there's a really strong hook or reason of why I should watch number 2, why I should watch number 3, whatever that may be.
Yeah. I thought I was going to make it through the whole podcast without talking about Ryan Trahan. It's not going to happen. I'm going to talk about him.
I was thinking it.
Yeah. So he does that really well from with the painting series from video to video, because he'll buy a plane ticket, which is like a big storyline in that video, and he will keep it a secret where he's going. And so he'll be like, all right, we're going to wake up tomorrow morning, jump on the flight, and we'll find out where I'm flying to tomorrow, kind of a thing. So even if it's not necessarily like a strong like value sort of thing that's being pitched into the next video, there can still be almost like a new story cliffhanger of, I really want to watch the next one now because I want to find out.
And it's a mental loop, right? You don't need to over dramatize it at all. The viewer is going to feel it, and that makes you watch. And if your video is not live for them to click into, it's going to make them come back. And as we know, that's the 4th viewer signal. So viewer satisfaction. I love that. And this also kind of makes me think too of analytics and some of the mistakes that I've really seen creators make. And a lot of it really tie back to story loops. And that's why this episode is so crucial, because it's an established pattern in retention graphs. Sam, myself, Blake, all of us here on the team have seen this hundreds of times, if not thousands of times. Creators closing loops too early, and then all of a sudden you had somebody flat, and then all of a sudden you close that loop and you've lost them now consistently to the end. That's a very common trend. So if that's something that you're seeing, that is a mistake that you probably made by closing a loop too early, or maybe you didn't share enough in there. Maybe you stripped everything out and they've kind of have what they want at that point. Yeah, there are all different reasons why loops can close in storytelling. To really enhance viewer engagement, though, and to improve your audience retention rates, I want you to experiment with some of the things that we talked about today. You've got to remember to incorporate loops, not just in the content, though. The key here is to start the loop at the very beginning, and that's going to come with your title and thumbnail. That's going to attract viewers in the first place. Remember, this is about sparking curiosity and providing satisfactory closure at the right time.
Every week, we love to leave you with a power tip, something new that YouTube's doing on the platform. And this week, I want to talk a bit about searching from the comments section. So a lot of times people have put links in the comments and it'll lead you off platform. Although we all know YouTube obviously wants to keep you on the platform as much as possible. So they're now adding the comments to be hyperlinked to wherever that keyword may be to be searchable. So let's say there's a comment, there's a phrase or a word that you want to know more about. It'll actually search within YouTube that keyword, that phrase, that word specifically, and search in the search aspects on YouTube. At the same time, the video you're watching will still be there, but back in the mini player as well. So you can now interact and search while you watch content. I don't know how we can focus with so much going on, but that's what we're doing. Besides hearing about your favorite pizza topping, which I'm really curious to hear about, I'd love for you to comment below and let us know, have you ever used open hooks or open loops in your storytelling before, in your videos, and maybe a bit about your next video, how that's going to look for you and how that's going to be executed. Thanks for listening to the Video Creators Podcast. We'll see you next week. Bye.